When you have your girls, you're never alone. You get together for coffee, maybe to work out, or just to laugh. We created Hey Girl, just for you. Can't wait for you to join us.
Hey everybody! Welcome to another episode of Hey Girl. We are watching episode 29. Oh my goodness! Kim Jacobs, episode 29. And can't believe it. With the crew. I'm so excited to have everyone back. If you are here, say hello in the comments. And if you're here for the first time, I want you to know that Hey Girl is a space where you can share your experience and be affirmed. Life can be overwhelming, but we know that there is power in conversation, and that's why we are here today to have an important conversation. I'm so glad that not only do I have my girl Kim with an I, hey yes, hi Kim, but I also have some very special guests here with me as well. We have our crew back in the house for a very special episode, right? Yes.
Right.
And we're so glad to have everyone here. Welcome to all of you and all of you who are with us today. So, I guess we should introduce them again, even though I'm sure many of you already know who they are. I'll start. The first special guest that we have here, right here with me, is my partner, my life partner, and I'm wearing my wifey shirt, so it's fitting for today's subject, the wifey today, and this is my loving husband, Everett Roper.
Oh, stop.
My partner in crime and the dumpster among us always. And Kim, who do you have sitting there with you?
Yes, I have my sweet Dimples. My partner in crime, Avery Jacobs, and we just celebrated our 20th last weekend.
That's right. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
So excited. I know that it wasn't the anniversary that it could have been, but I know. You celebrated well.
We did. He did well.
Awesome. And then, of course, we're so glad to have back with us our dear friends from Atlanta, Pastors Wesley and Stephanie Knight, pastoring the Revision Church in Atlanta. They've been there for 2 years, and they've been our dear friends for many, many years. Our children have literally grown up together, and we're just so glad to have you guys back with us today. Welcome, Wes and Steph.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
That's right.
And who are these other people, Kim Jacobs, that we have with us? Who are these other folks?
I know the Andrews, Dr. Raymond Andrews and Yen Andrews. Hello, guys.
So glad to have them as well. Dr. Andrews is a medical physician here in town, and right here in Huntsville, Alabama. And I've been practicing, opened a new facility here in town. Congratulations to you guys. A beautiful facility. Right down the street from us. And yeah, very convenient. I appreciate you all for doing that for me. Right. But wonderful friends of ours as well. Been married for how many years now?
Be 20 next year.
So 19. Okay. Rounding up.
I'm looking forward. I'm looking back.
I appreciate that. I appreciate onward forward. That's all. So you all have been married long enough to know a little something about marriage, then I'm assuming. Just a little bit. Well, we're excited for our conversation today. Real quick, before we get into it, though, have to give a little plug for something that is new for Hey Girl. Kim Jacobs, we are super excited about our new thing, which is Hey Girl merchandise.
Yes, cute stuff. Now you can order our stuff. Hey, girl.
I am so excited. Yes. So we just want to put a little plug in, just a little plug for you guys to let you know, introducing this week, the Hey Girl store. So we just, the holidays are coming. You might want to get a little something for the girlfriends. We even have face masks because we want to make sure you're covered. These times, everybody's getting face masks, so why not? Might as well.
Absolutely.
So
And it's just
anyway,
cute too, just to get your girlfriends, like you said, for the holidays.
Yeah.
A little Christmas something for your friends. Throw in a little hey girl bag or hey girl mug or mask. It'd be really cute.
Yeah, that was the idea. So we hope you liked it. At least go check it out. See what you think. Give us your feedback. Let us know if there's other little things that you would like to see us put out there. We'll be working on some other things in the coming months. So just thought we'd test out these few little items to get us started, and we'll see what we can come up with in the near future. So we're excited about that. All right. Well, we're not going to delay the conversation for today because it's very important. And let's see, first of all, who's out there with us today? Kim James, are you able to see who's with us today?
I see Jessica Dudley. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for joining us today.
Who else? Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I don't see anyone else. There's others on, but I just can't see them.
All right. Well, just say hello, guys, to us so we can say hello back. I know you're out there, and we appreciate you joining us. And it's been a tough week in a lot of ways. There's a lot going on in politics. There's a lot going on in the news. There's just a lot going on in our world today. And in our last episode, when we had the crew together, we were talking about marriage, and we got a lot of feedback. We got a lot of comments. We had a lot of people who were like, this is such an important topic. There's just so much going on in our lives in general that it impacts our marriages too. And this is something that we are needing, to talk about and have people, discuss. And some of the topics that we sort of touched on last time and maybe weren't even able to dig into were so important that we really sensed that we needed to sort of circle back and talk about in a little bit deeper way. So we promised everyone we would come back together again with the crew and try to dig in a little more. And so that's why we're here today. And we decided that today we would spend a little time on one topic in particular, and that topic is intimacy. Now, I say that, and I'm sure everyone's smiling. I'm sure we all have sort of an idea of what we mean when we say intimacy, right? Mm-hmm. So let's start off the conversation today with what we mean by that term. Okay, so let's just go around the table, so to speak, and get an understanding of what each of us thinks about when we think of that term, intimacy, as it relates to our marriages. And then we can kind of go from there to talk about intimacy in our marriages and why that's important to discuss. So, who wants to start it off?
Well, I guess we can. I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie, but I just wanted to say I'm really glad to be with the crew again. This is lots of fun. I've learned some things already in this program that I think are very meaningful. Number one, that Avery's name is Dimples. Is it that I think you said? Yeah. So, I'm really looking forward to referring to him.
Right. I think all the guys should actually start calling him that now.
That's only for me. That's only for me.
That's right, Kim.
Well, Kim. I don't know about that now. Anyway, I also want to reference the fact that when you said intimacy, I am answering your question, that your husband had a very baritone kind of when you said intimacy. So I did notice that as well. But
we already know what he's thinking.
Right, we already know what he's thinking.
Right.
But I think I'll say something. For intimacy, I think it's really about getting to know your spouse on a deeper level. Of course, that includes knowing them biblically, which of course we're going to get to. The sexual part, but But just beyond that, I think it's this process of the two becoming one in terms of marital intimacy, and that's what I think about.
When I think of intimacy, I think of a journey. You said process, journey of getting to know each other in a way like no other person. And the benefit of that is it enhances all other aspects of your life, including the sexual intimacy, because you're able to be honest, truthful. You've worked through some things together, so you have some miles behind you, and it just makes all the other aspects of marriage more enriched when you have the foundation of intimacy. And it takes time. You have a level of intimacy when you get married, and it has to mature throughout the journey. So it's not, it's a process. It's not a destination.
Mm-hmm. I would say that to me, intimacy is connection. I think of connectedness, and trying to do things to preserve that connectedness throughout those years of marriage. They can be lost. With kids, work gets busy, career gets busy, and the connectedness can go down. Now you can still be active, but when I say active, I mean you can still be sexual, but it doesn't mean that you're connected. So I think intimacy enhances that connection, and it's much more enjoyable under that context. So to me, I think of connection through time.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think of oneness. So everything that takes part in you becoming one with your spouse is part of intimacy. So I see it as oneness in communication, oneness in transparency, and in vulnerability. Like all of that is what makes intimacy, right? And those things trickle into the sexual intimacy. Like you can't have intimacy without all those components sort of working towards that oneness in that whatever area that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Thank you.
I'm hearing these answers that the definition of intimacy is not necessarily the first thing that you think about when you hear the word.
Right.
I'm hearing a lot of communication. It's just beyond. It's more so the act. It's the communication that has nothing to even do with that. And it's funny because Kim and I have been together so long that oftentimes when she talks, I finish her sentences for her.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we were talking this morning, and even though I knew what she was going to say, I listened. And it was just, and it just developed. It's developing the connection, and then that the relationship is even deeper. It's getting more robust.
Robust. I like that.
Yes.
And good practice. I think when you talk about intimacy, also we can't forget that there are relationships that start just by conversation. You hear people say, we never had sex, but we had a relationship. We communicated. In other words, you can actually cheat on your spouse by having communication with someone else, long distance, email, text. You can be intimate and not even touch. And so I can be connected with someone, totally connected. I could be a married person and totally connected, but I can be intimate with someone else. So like Avery said, intimacy is not just the touch. It's not the intercourse. It's not the in, the prefix in that is the same as intercourse. Intimacy can be involved in so many different ways. You can be involved in so many different ways, many ways to communicate. That can create intimacy as well. Very dangerous subject.
Right.
We, Kim and I stayed up late last night. Okay. That's why I called.
All right.
That's why I called. No, we know exactly why I called. We know you. We stayed up late last night talking about this subject, and we came to some conclusions along those lines that the communication piece is so important when we talk about intimacy. It's not the act that we think of. It's that communication piece that's so important.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it can be dangerous. Being intimate can be dangerous, right? So if you are intimate with someone who isn't your spouse, it can be dangerous. But what are the risks of intimacy with your spouse?
What comes to mind is that, as Ian was saying, that vulnerability, that the risk of it could be rejection.
Yeah.
It could be a lack of understanding and maybe a lack of motivation to go deeper with the one who's in need of it. So that is part of the risk. However, with any risk, there are pros and cons. And the pros, to me, greatly outweigh the cons. And it can take some time getting there. Now, someone may be in a dysfunctional relationship where when they share at that level, it's not appreciated, it's not affirmed, it's not duly noted. So that can become injurious for them. However, if they get the help that they need and embark on a healthier relationship, it has the potential to bind them closer and give them an exclusivity in their relationship that they don't have with others.
Yeah. And another part, though, of that possibility for danger in intimacy in a relationship, when we're doing marital or relationship counseling with couples, we find sometimes if you are intimate and you're in a dysfunctional relationship, you share certain things that are really deep to your heart, that those things can be weaponized against you in a disagreement or an argument. And so that's why it's important to work on the marriage on a whole, because in those kind of tender, intimate sharing times, you don't want that to be used against you. That could be very damaging as well.
I think for the men, we struggle with intimacy. I think number one, we're not great communicators as a whole, but secondly,
I'm
sorry, Pastor. It can be tough to, as a man, approach certain subjects as far as because you may have to reveal some things about yourself, and then you may have to be held accountable. And you may find out some things about yourself that you have to change, and that's uncomfortable. And so that whole communication piece, at least for the guys, we had a men's group, that was a tough piece. And that's a big part of intimacy, because you might get in an argument. You might test up some things. You might lose that connection for a few weeks. So the communication piece, especially for men, it can be weaponized, like you said, but it's hard to even to motivate yourself to get there sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So what's sort of, not what's the solution, but what is, first, how do you recognize that it's your vulnerability is being used against you? Like, how do you recognize that, and then what do you do?
Right.
Or how do you recognize that, every time you speak up, you're in the doghouse? Like, what do you do with that?
Well, you may have to point that out to your spouse. They may not even know it. It may be second nature for them, or you have to express how you're feeling. And I think everybody can own how they feel, but you have to speak up for yourself, which can cause more trouble. But I think if the person is not recognizing what's being done to them or what they're doing to their spouse, I think that might be, you may have to speak up for yourself.
Yeah. And I think also it depends on too, like, I would say how long you've been married, the maturity of your relationship, of your marriage. I mean, years ago, let's say, within 2 or 3 years of our marriage, or 5 years within our marriage, going to Avery and saying, well, I don't like this, or just have a conversation that may not be fitting for him. I mean, he would probably, or I would have, like, wait a minute, get upset about it. But I think through years, we've grown, and I can come to him with a concern or a need, or he can come to me. I mean, just the other day had a conversation about something, and I listen, and he does the same thing. He will listen to me and actually act on that. I say, okay, I got you. So I think it's a level of maturity in your relationship or your marriage.
Yeah.
But does it get any better? And what I mean by better, let me clarify what I'm saying. We're going to have to do this as long as we're together because we're constantly changing. And as we get older, as we start getting into our 40s and then our 50s and then our 60s, things change. Our bodies change. Our needs change. Our desires change. Our wants change. And so that communication is very, very important. We talk about dating first so you make sure you get the right person. But looking back, I don't know how long you can date someone to really understand some of the things that come out in your marriage. You're not going to come out dating. There's some things that your spouse is not going to tell you when they're not sure if this relationship is going to last. You're just dating. Hey, let me tell you about my upbringing. Those things don't come out. Sometimes they don't come out for 30, 40 years, 20 years. And they're deep-seated, and they're wounds. They're hurtful to bring out. So we have to remember that this marriage thing is a growth thing for us spiritually. It's pulling two people together, but at the same time, there's going to be blockage, and you just got to wait for that blockage to just kind of loosen. And then when that person feels comfortable talking, then they let it out. Now it may take you for a whirlwind, and like Ray said, it might be weeks of discomfort, but you say, "Wow, she shared that with me, or he shared that with me. I can't believe I didn't know that was going on." And then you got to work through that. And it might take a few years to work through that. But then here comes another one. Something else is going to be revealed. And I think that's what marriage is all about. You don't get engaged, get married, struggle for 3 years, what they call the 7-year itch. And then from year 7 to 50 years later, it's all just smooth sailing. There are leaps and bounds that you have to take as you go through your marriage. So that's been my experience so far. And I've heard it from others as well.
And I think that people who are early in the marriage, or even people who are dating, about to get married, they don't appreciate the change that occurs in marriage, or they don't anticipate the change. And they assume that it's going to be the way it is today is going to be the way it will always be. And so when things begin to change, they feel like something is wrong. But people need to understand that change is normal. In your relationship, things will change. You're going to grow, you're going to learn more about one another. It's a natural sort of progression of life, and you have to be willing to make the adjustment to those changes within your relationship. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. And if you're not willing to grow with the relationship, you're going to have growing pains. Well, you're going to have growing pains anyway. But I think that I've heard people say, "Well, she changed," or "he changed." And it's like, yeah.
That's good. You know how to change.
That happens.
That's it.
So, that shouldn't mean that the relationship is doomed. It just is what it is.
You mentioned something about in the communication process, how something may not come out, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, and we talk about weaponizing being vulnerable. Well, there's also the other side of weaponizing the fact that somebody's not willing to be vulnerable. I want you to express yourself to me, but you just don't want to. It may not be the time. But I'm angry because you won't talk to me. You will not communicate. You will not be intimate with me. And that can be used, it's just as bad as not opening up. Just as bad as being vulnerable is not opening up and expressing yourself to the one you've communicated, you've expressed that you want to spend the rest of your life with. So it's a two-edged sword in that manner.
Yeah.
It is. Well, some things, I don't think everything is hidden. Some things don't surface until you're married. That's why as much as you can learn on the other side is very important. Because if you are getting a whole heap, a lot of red flags, you haven't seen anything yet. That's the whole thing. So, this journey that we're talking about, I have a question. Do you all remember in your own relationships? It's a story that comes to my mind where you and your spouse went to that next level in intimacy. I recall a time, you remember when we lived in Brunswick, Georgia, and we had a disagreement. It was one of our first big disagreements. We had been married maybe under 2 years. And we were upset. You went for a ride, and I'm home with the baby, and I'm not happy because I'm like, well, we got one car, I think at that time, where I'm going to go. And so he came back home, and we had a conversation, and he shared with me, when you say this, when you say, you know, when I tell you I'm angry, and you're like, and? Like, what? And what does that mean?
Yeah, I'm getting upset.
You're like, I'm getting angry. I was like, oh, okay, we all get angry, don't we? And then he was saying to me, he said, oh yeah, but I know because you African American. He said that. Oh yeah, because you African. Well, when we got to the heart of the matter, it's funny now. It was not funny then.
That's true.
Because we were both 38 hot. Yeah. But it was in that moment because he says, when I tell you I'm angry, I'm wanting you to take a step back and feel what I'm feeling and give me the space I need. And when I say, well, when you say, you know, my head's moving and all that, you knew you married an African American when you walked down the aisle. And you were like, oh, okay. We saw each other's nakedness, emotionally.
Right.
And from that moment on, that was a moment where there was a shift.
Yeah.
When he said it again, I didn't treat it the way I used to. I didn't have a comeback. He stopped saying what he was saying. That was just one time early in our marriage where there was a shift. We shared what it hurt, where it hurts. Yeah. We shared that it hurt, and we stepped back from that space and allowed intimacy to grow. And that was just something I can look back on and rejoice and laugh. But boy, he called his mentor and he was telling him, this lady has upset me. I don't know who I talked to. I'm hoping it was Jesus, but I'm not sure. You know, we were fit to be tied. So I want to know, is there a story or a scenario where you're comfortable sharing that you saw that shift where, we just went to another level in intimacy in my marriage?
I mean, for us, definitely for me, I think, because he would be, like you said, 38 hot, you know, we get into an argument or whatever, and I would follow him. And he's like, I'm trying to get away, and I look back, you still coming like this. And finally, he was like, you know what? You can't do that because you're going to take me to another level. I'm trying not to get there, but you keep following me. And it's like you're trying to make me go up, and I'm not trying to go there.
It was Tom and Jerry in the house. Upstairs, downstairs, outside.
Here I go, pop it up. But I have truly learned that when we have a disagreement, give him time. Give him time to process that. Because I got a strong clap back game, you know, I can clap back real fast, you know. So I try to settle it down, walk away, let him have his space. And then once everything is settled, we come together and we talk about it. I mean, we have definitely learned how to do that. But it has taken time. I mean, I had to change myself, you know, and just tone it down a bit.
Yeah. I think for us, along the same line, if something happens, I want to deal with it right away, and I want to get the answers, and I want to know why. I'm a why. I need to know. You know, let's deal with this now. But my wife is, I need a little time. You know, give me 24 hours. You know, then we can come back together and be rational about it. So
because those stops aren't good right away. They're not good.
Yeah. And I learned. And it makes the communication more meaningful now. That you can have a disagreement, and then I know she's not leaving me. You know, she's quiet. You know, but I know we're gonna talk about it. Just not right now. And myself, I have to say, okay, you're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right. Just get through, and y'all work it out. So I think knowing your spouse in that way, how you handle disagreements, is important because a lot of things can go through your mind. When you're quiet, when somebody's not talking to somebody, you don't know why. True. It makes space for a whole lot of foolishness.
I
I was going to say, to answer your specific question though, Steph, I don't think there was one incident where we just went to the other level. It was with every incident we were growing and growing. You know what I mean? In terms of
how do we have disagreements, or this body language doesn't mean that, it means this. And, sort of know that it's still safe, but we got some things that we got to work out, but somebody needs to cool off, and you have to wait patiently. But at the same time, even though I need so much time, I also know that I can't take forever. And so I've had to grow into sorting through those feelings, making sure it's not because of fear that I'm not talking about it, and then be able to address it. So I would say it's not taking as long as it was before. It's taking less time, but still growing in sort of that shift of intimacy, I would say.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing again. I can't think of a specific instance or a specific argument, but I felt like there was a progression over time. I think definitely some of our women's meetings and going through some of the books that we were reading gave me the tools to argue better when we did argue.
Yeah.
So that I was able to, like, some of the resources we would go through would help me to reflect on how the language I was using in our, cause sometimes, do you all experience this, the arguments that you have, you feel like you're arguing the same way over the same stuff all the time, like you have the same argument over and over again, you kind of, like maybe it's a different day, maybe it's over a different thing, but it's really the same argument over and over again. And so I would reflect on, like, what is it that I'm doing each time?
Yeah.
How can I do this differently, or how can I do it better the next time? And so I would find that over time, I would have better tools or resources, so that when we would have that same argument again, I would at least do it a little better. And we would be a little more reflective, because he was having some of the same meetings or discussions in his groups and with the resources. And so I would find us using some of those tools in our discussions. And I'd be like, see, I know what's going on here. See, what's happening here is this. We would refer back to the book or something. And I would say, use some of the language rather than, revert to my usual whatever. And I think that helped us, I guess, get to the next level, because we would start to be more reflective about whatever it was, rather than just kind of going off the typical script that we usually just kind of fly off the handle.
And it's important to note, well, let me say this first. She's absolutely correct about her going to resources. Last night we were talking, no argument, no discussion about anything negative. But we're in the middle of a conversation. We're talking about this show and what we're going to talk about. She goes in the closet, comes out with a stack of 6 marriage books.
Yes, I have them
here. On the bed, and I'm like, dude, can we go to bed? It's midnight. But okay, it's all good. But what I was going to really say is, it's good for our listeners to hear that here we are, couples, but we're all still broken. And I think that's very important that everyone hear. I don't want anyone to assume that we have it all together. In fact, we're all guilty. Now, when I say all, I don't mean just the 4 of us. I mean all of us who are married, all those that are married, even those that are single. We look at other couples and say, ooh, how can she put up with him? He's a mess. Or how could he put up with her? I see that attitude. I see how she does this. I see that how this goes on. But in reality, everybody is taking this thing one step at a time. I don't care who you're paired up with. Everybody, even if they look like everything's going well, everything looks good, they dress the part, they wear the part, they're at church. This thing is a daily walk. It's a struggle, but it's also growth. And I like what Stephanie said. She said there are risks in being vulnerable. There are risks in marriage, but the pros and the cons, when you weigh them both, the pros are worth it for sure. But you have to deal with those cons as well. You can't sweep them under the rug. And one thing that we brought out the last time we talked, for the listeners that were listening before, in our men's group, that's what I just want to reiterate it. That was the major struggle for the men, is that I have issues, but when I bring them up, I'm shot down. And so I just don't bring it up anymore. And I choose to deal with my situation myself. It was repeatedly over and over again. And I know this is a women's show, Hey Girl, and I want to stress it again. I want the women to hear that. When your husband comes to you, he's trying to make himself vulnerable. He's trying to open up and say, hey, babe, this is bothering me. I'm struggling with this. It may seem foolish, crazy to you. It may seem like, all he does is ask for sex. Okay, what's wrong with that? Okay. Now, that may be an issue if it's too frequent, but that communication, that's a communication starter right there. And that's what he's really saying. Let's talk about this thing.
But a lot of men were shot down. When they get shot down, they revert. And when they revert, they go online and they go out the house to get what they need. And I'm not trying to fault women for men's failures and men stepping out. But what I am trying to say is communication is so important. Vulnerability is so important, and being open with your spouse. It sounds so easy. I know it's hard, but really it is. That's all it is. Just being communicated.
And I'm so glad. Okay, so I want to just go back. I want to circle back to where we started, because we started this conversation talking about intimacy, and I want to just come back to what we said intimacy is. It's oneness, it's honesty, truthfulness, connection. We talked about communication. And so all of those things, if that's intimacy, then the question becomes, and we talk about how it can be risky, and it has to do with vulnerability, right? And so we understand that all of those things encompass intimacy. And if a man and when women, we want our men to be, we want connection, we want him to communicate, we want all these things. But if we shut him down when he does when we want all those things, but we shut him down when he wants something from us.
Yeah.
And there's the risk.
When you brought that up,
what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, with Kim, with you bringing that up, there was a podcast. It's from the couple Deval and Kadeem.
Yes,
their podcast. I can't say the name of the podcast, but
right.
Because the name is risky. But in the podcast, the husband in the conversation, it was so interesting. I was like, oh wow, never heard it that way before. But the husband asked his wife Kadeem. He said, when you asked my hand, when I asked you for marriage and you wanted to get married, I'm giving you myself to no one else. That exclusivity, okay?
Right.
And monogamy. So why is it that once I give you this, what you asked for, once we get married, now I have to beg you for what I asked for what you married me for. You asked me for the monogamy relationship for me not to go anywhere else. But then when I ask you to give it to me, you got excuses and you turned me down.
Right.
Right. So that was like, wow. I was like, I never thought about that way,
Right. So
and they talking about communication and stuff,
Right. So how many of us women and, wives are being unfair in our expectations of our husbands? We want everything. We want the world, but we're not willing to give any in return.
Remember, you made a comment about working on yourself individually. You were saying that leads to intimacy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think. Well, you're asking specifically women, so I'll let the women answer. Then I'll talk from
it got real quiet on the live.
Say that one more time.
Ask your question. Yeah, ask it again.
Y'all heard my question.
No, you heard me.
I'm confused.
I guess how many of us are there any ladies on the commenting in the chat? Is it quiet on the chat also? Are we being unfair to our husbands? Are we requiring the world? Are we demanding that they marry us? Are we demanding that they be monogamous? Are we demanding that they talk to us, communicate with us? We want oneness. We want intimacy. We want. But then he comes at us and we're like, ooh, child, I'm tired. Ooh, child, I got a headache. Ooh, child, you know what kind of day I had today?
Preach, Kim, preach.
Oh, Wesley, watch yourself.
That ain't your prayer request.
I'm talking on behalf of all the men. I'm good.
I mean, let's keep it real, right? Like,
no, for real.
I think we have unrealistic expectations as a whole.
Right.
I think there are a lot of unrealistic kind of fairy tale, a little head in the clouds. You want to have the house, the car, the rock, all that. How we look and are perceived by others in today's society is very important. I really believe it gets much more attention than things that are going on inside of the home. And so I do think
that we have to take time to reflect more, to be more mindful, to be more intentional about our own well-being, and therefore having better intimacy with our spouse in all of its glory, because it comes in a variety of ways. So yeah, I think that it's just like the man that, he's supposed to provide, he's supposed to do this, he's supposed to be brave. He's a lot of expectations, and I think sometimes they're not based in full reality.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that we can't lose sight of the fact that we're in a relationship.
Yeah.
Relationship is two-sided.
It is.
Right.
He's not there to serve us.
Yeah.
We are there to serve each other.
Right.
So it's got to be both ways. And it's not to say that we should always, just give it to him regardless of how we feel, regardless of what's going on with our, it's not unrealistic, but we said communication. So it should be a conversation. Let's talk about it. It should go both ways, right?
Yeah. Well, in the comments, someone made a comment. I was going to mention this too. She said, "Hi, Tiffany." Tiffany said, I think God's demand stuff from us too. Be a good wife, cook clean, be good mother, look sexy all the time." And I think though, for me, I think we have to be honest, women. I think we change. A lot of wives, I mean, so much stuff change. Your hormones, you have babies. I mean, things changed when you were in your 20s, when you didn't have children. I mean, you could do it however many times you want to and not being tired. But I think with working, things shift. And I think that's what a conversation has to be had,
We talk about the change. Life does change.
Life does change. Whereas his probably never changed, not speaking about you, in general. But what I'm saying is your husband, he may be always in that honeymoon, like want sex all the time phase. But then your body has changed. I think you just have to communicate that, the frequency, to have a conversation.
And we said that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say there is something we're dealing with, though. Like you said, the body's change. That is chemical, And for men, the world could be ending, and we're still, ready to go.
Try it one more time before the world ends.
One more time
just one more.
One track mind.
One more time.
So I think that's something that's very, very important for us. That not much is going to affect that. Whereas you guys have a lot more to your sexuality or to your sex drive. So you do see those changes. I see women all the time. That's one of their main struggles is that, my drive is changing, his is not, what do we do? And I think the main thing is you gotta communicate. You have to negotiate. And that, like you said, that conversation has to be had. This is one of my needs. I got to understand your position. You understand my position. And we got to meet in the middle. We got to talk this thing out. It may have been spontaneous in your 20s, but now you are where you are. It may have to be scheduled. And that's just the reality. But everybody's getting their needs met. So,
but is scheduling sexy though, Ray? Is scheduling?
It can
sexy?
be, but it can be.
It can be.
Oh, it can be. Sir. Yes, sir.
All right, well, Wes, I'm with you, man. Spontaneity.
See, this whole conversation, we're saying intimacy is not sex, but sex is part of intimacy.
Yes.
And that is kind of how we have to see it, that men are trying to connect. They are trying to communicate. And that's clearly one of the facets in which that happens is through sex as well.
That's right. So when you're turning it down, what you're doing is turning down connection. You're turning down communication.
Okay, wait.
He's on a run.
Yeah, I'm gonna run. I'm a preacher. Don't stop me. I got 3 more to go.
That's one of the things that I learned about myself early on. And I didn't know that sex was a communication point. And that as a man, I'm like, man, I feel closest, during that time or after that time. And, you have children, there's a certain time you can't participate in that. And you feel like, man, and it became clear to me, listen, this is a communication method, at least for me. For her, she may want to sit down with a cup of coffee and talk, and but for me, my primary mode is another way. So it for some men, it could be very, very important, like picking up the phone.
That's right.
I want to put in a small plug here. I want husbands to also know that women don't find joy in saying no. It's not like we say no and we're like, right, now what's on Netflix? That's not it. We actually carry guilt with us for if it's something, if we're not feeling well, if it's a hormonal thing, like that hormone thing is real. Your sex drive is low. It is so hard because your husband wants to not have the one where, you're not awake and alert. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So sometimes that's sleepy sex. I didn't say it, girl. It's okay. Can I say, there's no sleepy sex allowed,
Right.
So we're trying, but there's a guilt that we carry when we are not 100% there. So the plug is, don't be afraid to talk to your medical professional, your OBGYN, your family doctor, and say, hey, listen, my sex drive is gone. Is everything okay? Can you check my hormone levels? And then I think I'm okay. I think getting creative is okay.
The Lord.
I think there are things there. It pleases the Lord still. Yes. Angels will sing, right? So it's okay. It's okay because this is a part of intimacy. And I think all the different parts that we talk about kind of collide in this area. Like, I think if everything is in oneness, this is something that's great. I just noticed his head was So anyway, that's just my little plug that,
I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
So Tiffany Hutchinson is saying sometimes a woman's sex drive is higher. So certainly that's true. And God bless all women whose sex drive is higher. Like, amen.
Amen. And if it is, then hallelujah. What do you say? Hallelujah.
I'm not gonna say. I was just thinking.
You're not gonna say it.
First got married.
Okay. Yeah, when we first got married, I was at the seminary. We were at the seminary, and
there was nothing to do in there.
There was nothing to do in Berrien Springs but study and have sex. That's why you'll discover there's a whole generation of preachers that were born at the seminary.
Or conceived.
Conceived. Yeah, but it was at that time that I just realized, I praise God that, there was a high desire to have study time and playtime. So praise God.
Are we too old to enroll in the seminary?
What'd you say?
Are we too old to enroll in the seminary? Still possible, right? I think Yen hit it. I love what you said, Yen. That aspect coming from a woman's point of view and the guilt, and then we throw in the men's point of view of rejection. It leads right back to that one word is communication, right? So, like you said, if the woman communicates, I'm going to say no. This is why. Then he can better receive it. Right. And then you may lead to scheduling it or being patient and waiting until she's available already. But I don't think it's fair to say that always happens. I think what often happens is, no, not tonight. I've had a hard day. I was telling Kim last night, how many things could a man tell a woman no? How many times can a man tell a woman no and that not lead to argument or shut down for weeks? If Kim came in the house with groceries and she said, can you help me get the groceries out of the car? And I said, no, I'm watching the football game. How do you think that would go? It wouldn't go well for long. There's not many things you can tell your wife no and just end the conversation. And so I think it's the same way with a man. When you come and say, hey, honey, can you help me in this area? And she says, no, I'm tired. It's the same feeling you would feel if your husband told you, I'm watching the game, I can't help you right now. And there were a lot, and I keep going back to that men's group, but that's when you got a group of men, don't want to call any names and all that kind of stuff. But when you got 60 to 70% of the men in a men's group saying, I struggle with porn because, and they revert back to the fact of what's going on in their own home, it makes you understand that there's not communication going on. I think that's where we want to lead. Very important to say no, but say why.
Right.
And also
That's fair.
the other side to that, which was troubling, was that there were husbands who didn't express or communicate with their wives how they really felt about other things because they wanted sex. And they knew if they said how they really felt about whatever, they wouldn't get it. So they just shut down in
Yeah.
other areas of the relationship. Their response to their wives about other things was whatever. Because if they put up a fuss or gave their opinion, they knew she would shut them down in the bedroom, and it was not worth the fight.
Come on.
So where's intimacy then? Because someone mentioned here that it's not just having sex, right? You can have
Right.
sex and not be intimate.
People do it every day.
And
Yeah.
so the relationships are they're in a relationship, they're sexually active, and there's no connection really.
Yeah.
And that's still a problem. So you can have a problem either way with intimacy.
Okay.
And ladies, that's a problem. So if your spouse doesn't feel safe opening up to you, being vulnerable with you, being able to express how he really feels, because he knows that you will shut him down in that area, you need to figure that out. You need to be able to create a safe environment in your relationship so that you can truly experience intimacy in your marriage.
So let me ask
So Sis
then,
West, yeah.
from the lady's perspective, I mean, and of course, we might not be speaking from our own personal experience, but just generally as a female, what is it? Why would there be that shutdown? Is it that they're saying, okay, I'm not having sex with you because I'm mad? Or is it I'm upset, I'm trying to process what's going on, and so mentally, I'm not punishing you, but mentally, I can't get into that space? Because we do know for sexual intimacy that you got to be in the right headspace as well, not just have energy. So I'm wondering if sometimes, if it's both things, if it's being weaponized again, or if it's just I can't even think about that because I'm still thinking about what you said to me that I didn't like.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's important. If someone said, so should we never say no? I was a woman, a female responded in the chat. Should we never say no? I think the important thing is, if you say no, you have to say why. I'm not happy with how you dealt with X, Y, and Z. We need to resolve that, and then we can come
That's
together.
a good point.
So if you say no, you need to explain why. And I think that will lead to communication on both sides.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I need to deal with that unresolved issue, and then we can come together. Because
Right.
you don't want you. Go ahead, Kim.
No, go ahead.
No, I was to say you don't want to come together in that way, because again, that doesn't lead to intimacy.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
So we talked about being honest, being open, having connection. So sometimes you got to work some things out, like the Bible says, prayer and fasting, but you need to come back together.
Yeah.
Amen.
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 Amen, Reverend Andrews.
Yes.
He's trying.
And I think and I guess it's a every relationship is different. You have to figure out what the issues are and how best to resolve them, but it's trial and error, it's counseling, it's conversations. Sometimes you can work them out, between the two of you. Maybe you need an external person to, who's a professional that can come in and help you. I think that, women, as the men have said, sometimes having sex can open up the conversation, right? So maybe you don't necessarily feel like it. We in our relationships have to do things we don't always feel like doing. I don't feel like cooking every night, but I do it because my family has to eat, right? So sometimes you may have to say yes when you don't necessarily feel like it, but at the end of the day, it may benefit you in the long run, right? Not to say that you always say yes when you don't feel like it, but maybe sometimes you do. But if doing it tonight will open up a conversation that you two can have to deal with some of the other things that you're needing to deal with, like Ray said, he's able to have a conversation with his wife when that need is satisfied, right? So then if there's something they need to talk about, that opens the door for that important conversation, right? So you figure out what will work in your marriage to deal with whatever the issues are. The thing is, it's all of the above approach, whatever it takes.
the answer is not shutting down and building up walls. That's the bottom line. And if that's what you're doing right now, God bless you, because it's not going to work. Your marriage is going to fail, even if you think it's working. If your husband is doing the whatever, okay, happy wife, happy life kind of responses, you may think it's fine, but you don't know what he's doing to satisfy that need elsewhere. And that's the issue that I want everyone to understand.
That's right. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like we have to redefine maybe what we understand sex to be with your spouse. So it's maybe if there's a clear understanding of this is his form of communication, rather than is this going to be rated like he's just getting his?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's easier if you think that intimacy, he's getting his and it's done. It's easier to say no to that.
Yes.
But
so the
yeah,
whole session. Yeah, go ahead.
No,
go ahead, Wes.
I think what you're saying is key. So as we've plugged the medical, your medical practice, you all's medical practice.
I didn't say come.
No. I know you didn't say to come there. I'm telling everybody, if you need to check your hormone levels and all that, see Dr. Ray. But as we plug
the address too.
That's it. Yeah, we can put the address.
Put it
in the chat, Ray. While I'm
run that on the bottom.
But if I may, selfishly plug the book Thirst. See,
yes, go ahead.
Oh.
Yes,
right.
You knew he was going somewhere.
Right, because
he was going there.
Because in the book, we talk about this whole thing of sex as communication. So what you said about, okay, so for the man, it's communication. That's true. But I also want us to know that it's communication for the woman as well. It's communication both ways. Might be a little more frequency from the male, but it's communication, both male and female. So then the issue is if he doesn't want to, for whatever reason, that communicates something too. Not participate.
Okay.
Non-participation communicates something.
So I've never heard the approach of the perspective that intimacy is communication for the female. So can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that there's
exchange.
Yes, I think there's a misnomer that for men, sex is the way they communicate. For women, it's more talking and conversation. I think that's a big generalization. And you find that out in counseling people and talking with people. You realize a lot of women want it, either want it just as much in terms of the physical intercourse thing, or the benefits from what comes from sexual intercourse, the closeness and all that, which means you want sex just as much.
Right.
So I think we have to kind of debunk this myth that it's just guys trying to get it and trying to get theirs. Right. Everybody's trying to get theirs, and everybody needs to get theirs. It's communication.
What this caused me to think of, though, is just perception and the environment in which you grow up in.
Right.
And I grew up in an environment and at a time where I observed other women using withholding as a power play. And it's just like, okay, you keep talking, you're going to end up in the doghouse. Right. And you said intimacy is not sex, but sex can bring about more intimacy, or however I said it. I can't remember now. But anyway, you can bet that with that mentality, there's not good communication.
Right.
There's not good partnership and working things out. And sex is just another facet in which you can see the dysfunction playing. So that's why I hope we, as male or female, but speaking as a woman, that we address any unresolved issues in our lives, because it can be a barrier. I grew up knowing way too much about the people in my house and their frequency or the lack thereof. So you may be thinking, oh, okay, well, we don't talk about this in front of your children. Okay, your children know whether you're connected or not. They can feel. They have that ability. And when there's unresolved issues, there's a lack of affection, there's a lack of endearing eye looks here and there, that communicates even something to them. And it can be insecurity. It can be just fearfulness of will mommy and daddy make it? So all these things that we value that contributes to intimacy,
Right.
it's worth it. And if we've grown up in an environment where it was not done in a healthy manner or we didn't see it practiced, it would behoove us to take the steps so that we can acquire the skills to have true intimacy in our marriages, because it's worth it.
True. Yeah, behoove us.
Behoove. I like that.
No, I don't know. I'm an open soul.
And Stephanie,
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Stephanie made a very important point there. You look at most homes are single parent homes. So what do you see? How much interaction do you see of spouses together? And then those that are together, how many of those are healthy?
Right.
So a lot of us go into marriage with an unhealthy approach as far as knowing what an example is of what is true intimacy.
Yeah.
What is sitting down and having dinner together? What is catching your parents in the laundry room, having a kiss, or them going out on a date.
Right.
You don't see those sort of things. So going into marriage, that's not a reality. The door's closed, we do what we got to do, and then we're apart. That's all I know. Or I know my mom is not with anybody. I never see that. So there's those things we take in that we've got to, again, over years of massages, we got to work it out.
Right.
Guys, I love that you all have come to this part of the conversation where you're talking about family, because this is actually where I want us to go when we come back in December. We are coming down to the end of today's show, and I actually do want to come back in December to do an episode where we talk about marriage as it relates to our families, because I know that the other aspect to the marriage relationship is what we bring into marriage, and that is whatever we saw growing up, whether we were in an intact home, whether we came from a single mother, we were the product of a single parent home, whatever that legacy is that we inherited is what we will then pass on to our own children. And I think it's a very important aspect of this conversation, which we can't get into today, but I hope that you all will come back and do this again. We will actually probably not be able to do that one live because December is the holidays, but we'll do it again. We'll record it and play that episode in December if you all are willing to share your experiences in your different homes, and how you have taken what you learned growing up and incorporated them into your own marriages, and how you're going to pass on what you know now and what you've learned to your children. And the next generation will be better than us. They will know better than us, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thank you guys so much for this conversation. It was fantastic. I learned a lot, and I hope that you all who were watching was blessed as well. I think we touched on a lot of good stuff. I feel like we got a lot of good information out that we needed to. As Wes has already mentioned, he has a book called Thirst, which is relevant to this conversation. So definitely look that up. We'll put that information in the chat. I also want to make reference to a couple of other resources that I think are really important. We have a resource list already out there, and Yin actually mentioned the importance of resources for your sexual intimacy. That is absolutely okay, guys. We are Christians, but it's okay to enhance your sexual life within the bounds of marriage. And there are actually, my husband is so happy right now. There are actually some wonderful resources. A company called Pure Romance that I want to make you all aware of. That is a blessing. Amen. It's on the list, so check out the resource list. It's on our page as well, and there are other resources there that I am personally a believer in. And I also want to just mention a few books that I think are really good. I pulled up this one. I wasn't able to mention it specifically, but The Power of a Praying Wife. Y'all remember this one by Stormy Armand? That's a classic text. And wives, I think that every wife should really read this book, because we should really be praying for our husbands. And you just can't go wrong honestly, if we incorporate prayer into every aspect of our lives and our relationships. Of course, I've talked about For Women Only by Shanti Feldhahn. The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands by Dr. Laura Schlesinger is actually a good book. And she really talks about, in a kind of facetious way, I mean, the proper care and feeding of husbands, I mean, but she really makes the point that I was making, which is, just take care of your man, basically. It's not a bad thing. And then, of course, Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, Love and Respect is a really good resource as well. So these are on the resource list. I definitely encourage everyone to check it out. And we want you all's marriages to thrive, not just survive. So God bless you all. Thank you again for joining us. We are going to close out with a few scripture. So I'm going to read those
now. The first one comes from Romans 12:10. It says, love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. And Galatians 5:22 says, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then Song of Solomon 2:16, I belong to my lover, and he belongs to me.
Praise God.
So,
to your lover. He belongs to you and you belong to him. Cherish one another. Give and receive love. It's Saturday night and it's cool where we are.
It's so chill outside.
All the more reason to snuggle up. Guys, I loved having you on.
Gotta go.
Have a great night. Love.
Have to go practice
See you
what you
next
preach.
time.
That's a wrap.
Thanks for watching our show today. Be sure to join us next week as we continue thriving, not just surviving. Our special guest next week will be TV host, author, and activist Bryn Herrera to talk about her new show and how she thrives against all odds as a true girl boss. Don't miss it.